I think we're live now. So, hello, everybody. Welcome to Why Read episode 14. And today, joining me, I have my wonderful friends and co-hosts for the A Song of Ice and Fire Read/Reread Along 2023. Um, so, I guess I'll just go around and maybe I'll go clockwise from where I am. And so, uh, starting off, I'll let you all introduce yourselves. So, starting off with Joana.
Okay, thank you. I'm Joana from the channel Joana Sousa, and I love to read. So I'm here. I read mainly fantasy. I read really mainly fantasy. A Song of Ice and Fire is my favorite. I love Brandon Sanderson as well, and Joe Abercrombie, and those are my favorites. So thank you for having me.
Oh, so happy to have you here. Yay. And then Alex from Tall Guy Reads.
Hello, thanks for having me. I am excited to be here. I've been loving watching these with all the guests that you've had on so far. It's been a lot of fun. I am the host of Tall Guy Reads, a channel where I talk about science fiction and fantasy primarily, but I do I've been reading all my life, and it's kind of gone in and out of fantasy and mystery and horror and other stuff as well. So I've read a wide variety of stuff, and more recently it's been a lot of fantasy, and it's been really fun to kind of catch up on a lot of adult fantasy that I've missed the last couple of years. It's been I don't know, it's been a great experience. So I'm excited to be here and to talk about whatever comes up in this conversation.
Yay, exactly. And then lastly, Scott, the bald booktuber.
Hey, it's just a pleasure to be here. I am so honored to have been asked. So great to be among these fine folks. I read primarily fantasy, adult fantasy, but I also mix in quite a bit of sci-fi. I read some thrillers. I like nonfiction. So I kind of run the gamut a little bit. But yeah, for sure, you won't find too many bigger Robin Hobb fans this side, other than maybe Derry, who definitely I consider to be the expert of all things Robin Hobb. But
yeah, for sure,
that is my queen. She is my favorite author by a lot.
Ah, she's wonderful. And I know that Kyle can't stay long and has a question. I will go ahead for Kyle's sake and let Alex answer this question, even though it's not the first question I generally ask on this live show. Go ahead,
it's
Alex.
such an obscure question. I've never been asked this. I am 6'8".
So. How tall is that? 1 second. I need to convert this into something that I understand.
I don't know.
Very, very tall.
It's very tall. It's over a foot taller than I am. I'll say that.
What? That's 2 meters. How are you so tall? Wow. I would be like a little dwarf next to you. You know?
You all have no idea. I'm a midget. So
I think you are even shorter than me, right, Joanna? I think we talked about this before.
I'm shorter than everybody. I'm 5'1". So
I think I'm 5'2", if I'm not mistaken.
Wow. Yeah. I'm even shorter than Bookborn. So, and I know I think she's 5'2" again. Also, if I'm not mistaken.
That's really tall. You could never guess that from. One day you need to stand next to your bookshelf.
But it comes in handy. I'm always like needing tall people to get stuff down for me.
I know.
Yeah. Anyway, yes. So we are here because this whole entire show is called Why Read, because I just love asking this question. I think that it's a dynamic question, and the idea behind it, of course, is what makes you gravitate towards a book right now, because so many things in our life distract us from everything. And so I want to ask my guests, like, what is pulling their attention to reading a book right now? Why read? And Joana, I'll go ahead and start with you.
Okay, so actually it's funny that you're asking this, because I haven't touched a book in like over a week, I think, or a week and a half. So I've really been very busy and just not focused on reading, I guess. So funny that you started with me. I think for me, the reason why I gravitate towards books is because I just love stories. And actually I discovered this also because I was having this discussion with my friend Sophia from Sophia's Thoughts. And I read a lot on audio lately, especially. And I thought, well, do I even like reading? Because if I don't sit down to read a book, am I even liking it, or what is it? And I'm like, I just love stories. And this is why I also love audiobooks, because it's like someone telling you the story. And I think when I want to read, when I feel pulled to a book, it's either because I love the world or the author, or I'm super interested because there's a hype around it, But mostly it's also because I want to escape. I want to discover new people. I want to discover new worlds and just go into someone else's imagination. And I saw this quote this week on Instagram that said, "Isn't it funny how when you fall in love with a character, you're literally falling in love with a part of someone else's imagination?" And I thought that was very beautiful. And so I think it gives us a little insight into what other people think, you know.
Oh, I love that. Yeah, that's really interesting about falling in love with another person's part of another person's imagination.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot that could be said about that. Um, yeah, interesting. So, Alex, I'll let you answer the question next.
Okay, well, I think I've been reading forever since I can remember, so it's always been a huge part of my life. I think it's something that even though my parents tried to get me and all my brothers to read, I was the one that definitely gravitated to it the most at a very young age. It was just something that I think both for the escapism part of it that everyone talks about, especially with like fantasy and fiction in general, it's just that usually gets brought up. So there's definitely that aspect of it. But I also feel like it was always the most personal way for me to experience a story, if that makes sense. Like I also am a huge film buff and I love like TV shows and music and all the things. But I think when it comes to something that is just very different than everything else that's out there, I feel like the reading experience is usually that. It just is different from anything else as it comes to experiencing a story, and then it changes so frequently. I feel like I can read the same book multiple times throughout my life and usually pick up much different things on each read, whether it's based on how old I am or what I've experienced or whatever it is. So there's a lot of stuff like that. But I think, you know, I love being put into situations that I don't experience on a day-to-day basis through reading. I love just, you know, the escapism part of it, seeing new worlds and stuff that is just not attainable in real life. And just, I don't know. It's just something I enjoy doing. I love reading. I love reading for my own enjoyment. And I don't know. There's a bunch of levels to it.
Absolutely. No, beautifully said. Beautifully said. I could relate to the multiple levels thing and being the biggest book enthusiast, I think, in my family too. Even though my whole family loves reading, and I love that about my family, that they're all actually all very well read, probably more well read than I am, some of them, but it's just I get so enthusiastic about it. I love it.
Yeah.
I love reading and I love talking about reading. And I love it's just a whole thing. There are so many levels. So Scott, how about you?
Yeah, it's a great question. It deserves a great answer. I've been thinking about it since your first episode with Alan. And to save the suspense, I don't have a great answer, but I will do my best. So I don't always love humanity, if you follow me here, but I love thinking about the human condition. So for me, whether it's through fiction or through nonfiction, I feel like I could explore the human condition better than through any other medium, whether that's movies, TV, whatever. So the quote I always gravitate towards, and I'm going to butcher it, so it's a paraphrase, but in A Dance with Dragons, you've got Jojen talking to Bran, and he says, a person who reads experiences 1,000 lives. Someone who doesn't experiences one. So that's always stuck with me. In order for me to be empathetic and to see things through other people's eyes, that kind of stuff I need to read. So for me, it's a compulsion as much as something that I enjoy. I don't think I answered any part of the question, but that is the best I can do, I think.
No, it expands your sense of self, I think, is what I'm hearing from that. Because you're getting so many different other perspectives, like you said. And man, George R. R. Martin, as I'm like reading or rereading A Feast for Crows, man, he is just
so good.
He is so good. And he's just such a genius at just continuing to incorporate more perspectives and more perspectives and more perspectives.
For sure.
Yeah, that is a great answer. And I think it's interesting. Like, I think something that is beautiful about fantasy specifically, I like all of you, I love reading other genres. But I think something that's really special to me personally about fantasy is getting to read a series and getting to live in a world for a while. Because I feel like, especially if I'm living in a world of an author's creation and their imagination for multiple books, I feel like, especially once I get to the end of that journey, there's something about it that I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I feel like this is going to sound weird, but it feels to me almost like a slightly intimate experience because I'm seeing into being in that world that they created and
Yep.
feeling so immersed in it. I don't know how to explain it. It just feels like there's something intimate about that. Does anybody relate to that?
Yeah, I think
I
so. I
definitely
mean,
do. Yeah.
it's fun to compare what is the same between a different world and ours, but it's also fun to see the differences. And to sometimes they are differences that the author is being slightly. I wish it was this way for us, and sometimes it's man, it would be horrible if it was that way.
Yeah,
for us.
this is significantly worse.
So,
That's
and I like
true.
both of those perspectives. That's really cool. So,
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's true.
I agree. I love long series for that reason. I think that's a big plus for fantasy. Like I just finished Realm of the Elderlings and
yeah,
16 books, and it's just like you're spending a ton of time with certain characters and in a world. And by the end, it's just like almost cathartic reading the last book because you're just like, wow, I don't want this to be over, but at the same time, I am like ready for the end. But at the same time, I don't want it to end. And there's just like this constant battle going on. And it's just very unique. I can't really name another type of genre that has something like an epic fantasy series where you get all of those emotions at the end of such a long time spent with a certain character.
And you often hear people say at the end of a series like that, they say, I don't want to leave this world. It almost feels like you went on a journey or on a trip and you're like, no, I want to stay here forever. And that's really how it feels sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I was wondering about that. Do you all prefer, do you have a preference when it comes to series? Do you prefer beginnings or endings?
Oh,
I'm a weirdo and I like middles.
I like middles too.
Middles are a good answer.
I think beginnings I enjoy because you're getting to know people and stuff, but sometimes if there's a part where I'm gonna bow out, it's usually the beginning where I'm like, just get on with it. And usually I'm a pretty patient reader, but sometimes beginnings I fall out. And then endings, if I really love the series, endings hurt because then I'm like, well, that's the end of that. I can't now I either gotta re-experience it by rereading or talk about it for a bit, but that's the end of that. So yeah, I like middles. I'm a weird guy.
I prefer endings, I think, for the reason you said. I love stuff that makes me sad, which is probably why Fool's Errand will be forever one of my favorite books in the whole world. And I just love feeling that feeling of bittersweetness. You arrive at the end, even just comparing, for example, even though season 8 was what it was, when we arrived at the end, it felt like I was so sad. Like I had to close a chapter of my life, and I love that feeling. I know it's maybe a bit sad and a bit weird, and it says a lot about me probably, but I just love that feeling of like, I'm so sad to leave these people, So I will say, but if the ending is butchered, then then I get really angry. So, but I do love endings.
Yeah.
I feel like,
really... Go ahead.
Like, I don't know. I like both endings and beginnings. I think, like Scott, obviously beginnings are going to be where I would bow out of a book if I were like just can't get into it at all. Yeah. But I do love epic fantasy story beginnings. Like I just think when they're done really well, they're just so charming in a way. I don't know. Like I just read Dragonbone Chair, and that was obviously the beginning, and I just like loved everything about it. And usually when people say, oh, this epic fantasy series, the beginning is very slow, they're doing like all the things you would normally see in an epic fantasy book one. I usually end up enjoying that stuff quite a bit, and as long as it doesn't overstay it's welcome or anything, and it's like 900 pages of it, for the most part I really enjoy that stuff. And then the ending, obviously, I really enjoy as well. I think with trilogies it's different because I have found recently that I've enjoyed book twos and trilogies quite a bit, and I don't know why, like because a lot of times that's the weakest link in trilogies, and I feel like Prince of Nothing, I enjoyed book 2 the most. I'm trying to think of other ones. There are some others.
A lot of good book 2s in there.
Yeah, a lot of good book 2s in Hob. And I don't know, it's just something I really liked.
I think Abercrombie too, Before They're Hanged, and then Trouble with Peace.
That's my favorite. Yeah.
Trouble with Peace is great. Yes.
Yeah. Goodness. That's why I did that whole second book. I did a video recently about second books that deliver, basically, because I think it's amazing. I love a good beginning of a series because I just love to be introduced to a new world and to be introduced to new characters. But it is amazing when an author can really develop things and keep it going, keep the complexity going. But then there's something about an ending too. I think I felt that way. It was interesting because I feel like there are a lot of series I've started that I haven't finished. And then when I finished Malaz and Book of the Fallen specifically after having that experience. Now, that was the best ending I've ever read to a series ever. But after having that high, it made me actually a lot more committed to finishing series because I was like, I just love that high. I love that feeling of just,
Yeah.
it's bittersweet though. It's like you said, Joanna, I think there's a bittersweet quality to that too.
It's something I love when you reach the ending. You can look back at the beginning and you can just
Yeah.
see how far these characters have come in the world or whatever it is, like if it's a war or politics, and you just see the things change, and it's just so incredible. I love that. I love looking back on things and seeing how everything led to this ending that we're at. And I think that's something that I'm extremely looking forward to, finishing Realm of the Elderlings. I'm about to start tomorrow, book 3 in Rainwilds.
Okay.
So
City of Dragons.
I'm very excited to also just like continue on and finish, because I just want to see, like, we start with Fitz when he's so little, and then at the end, and it's like I'm just so excited to see it all.
It's a roller coaster.
Yeah.
Indeed, it is. Yeah.
It is a roller coaster for sure. So, as far as Realm of the Elderlings, is that so? I know that both Alex and Scott, you've both finished that series. Is that a series where you finish it and you want to go back and reread the whole thing, or is it?
I mean,
more...
I'm in the middle of a reread, so
That's
yeah.
true.
I took I think it's been a couple months, but so far I've reread Farseer. That was my second reread of that. I've reread Live Ship, my second reread of that, and I reread Tawny Man. And definitely, having completed the entire thing, the rereads are very, very impactful. So
Yeah.
I need to go through and do my rereads of Rainwild and Fitz and the Fool, which is my favorite trilogy of all time. So I'm looking forward to those at some point. I don't know how to do them.
Yeah. I remember putting down Assassin's Fate, and after, I don't know, a few hours or something, I picked up Assassin's Apprentice, and I like started read like probably 50 pages, and I was just like, wow, this is just so nostalgic and weird, but also like I made me very excited for a reread. I think it's always I know some people could just like go from the end and go start and just go constantly do this giant circle of like finish and start a giant series. For me, I definitely have to take some time off and away from the series, but I am very excited to reread that series and just like a number of series that I've enjoyed. I think rereads it's a really cool aspect of books, especially in fantasy, that I think makes them really special if they can give you a different experience and a more rewarding experience on successing reads after that first one. Like Song of Ice and Fire.
Yeah, that's the thing that's really surprised me this past year. Now, when I was younger, when I first started loving reading, I never thought I would be a rereader. Like, I never thought that would be something I would be interested in doing, because I always thought there are always so many books I haven't read. Why would I reread one I've already read? And now I'm rereading A Song of Ice and Fire. I'm rereading via audio Guns of the Dawn by Adrian Tchaikovsky. I read it physically the first time, so I'm listening to the audiobook now. And there are several books that I've been interested in rereading, and I've been rereading, and it just feels like, I don't know that I love any book more on a reread, but I just think it's a different experience. It's a different experience. And I know, like, right now, rereading A Feast for Crows, it's like intoxicating for me because I'm like, I'm back in this world. I'm with these, it's like, it's flooding back, but it's a different experience. It's just a very different experience.
Yeah. I'm very excited to reread the Stormlight books, because I've only read them once and I really love them so much. And so I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't wait to reread, because you know where it's at in book 4, and you're like seeing it all again. But yeah, rereading the first 3 books in A Song of Ice and Fire was so good for me. It just really solidified it as like why I love it so much. And I'm actually super excited to start A Feast for Crows and to see how I feel, because I've never read it, like I told you before. So
I'm so excited for you to read it.
I know.
Joanna, do we know the release date on Stormlight 5?
I think it's November next year.
November next year. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I'm going to reread the first 4 leading up to that as well. So
I've never read them, so I'm going to be reading them next year, I think.
So good.
I don't think I'll reread them, but I'm caught up. So I'm just going to probably look up some summaries. So do you
There'll
all
be
think
plenty of
that we'll get
there'll be plenty
a
of
win?
content. That'll be
Yeah.
There will.
yeah.
There'll be a lot of stuff. Do we think that we're gonna get a Winds of Winter 2024? I've been hearing rumors about this.
I am going to agree with Kyle on this one. I think 2024, it seems like all these authors are collaborating to release their big anticipated book next year. And so like Scott Lynch, George R. R. Martin, I just feel like the next Dresden book, I feel like a lot of authors are being like 2024 is it. And hoping George is the same way, but we'll see.
We're just gonna manifest this, you know.
Yeah.
I think we'll get wins.
Okay.
I
I
don't
stopped
think we'll get
speculating
anything
a long
else.
time ago. So I'll
Yeah.
just if I get an announcement on George's blog, I get the announcement. That's what I
will
have
say,
been
reading A Feast for Crows, I'm just like, wow, I want wins so bad because it's just so much. There's so much being set up for it. I'm just like,
Yeah.
need to know.
There's so much in that story. There's so much there.
But the
Yeah, I
problem is that
really
you'd
hope
want
so.
everything, you know? You'd want Winds, you'd want A Dream of Spring, you'd want the next Duncan Eggs, you'd want Fire
Correct.
and Blood Part 2, you'd want...
Correct. all
Yeah.
of it. That's
Yep.
correct.
I want all of them the same amount, you know?
Yes.
So
Yeah. Yeah. I hope the rumors are real. I hope it happens, but
Yeah.
I guess we'll see.
I
Yeah.
love Kyle. We don't live in a fantasy life.
Oh no, did I miss that? My goodness.
Because
how
Evie was
funny.
saying maybe we'll get also Patrick Rothfuss's book. I was like, no.
Oh man.
He had an announcement. He's coming out with a new novella.
Novella.
I
New.
know.
Terrible. Yeah, new in quotes.
I believe,
We're looking
yeah.
at a
I
short
think he
story.
released it as a short story and is just expanding it.
Yeah, it is.
Have you all read that, by the way? Have you all read Name of
I've
the
read the
Wind
first.
and Weiss Sphere?
I haven't read the second one. I read the first
Yeah.
one.
Same as you.
It was like one of my first big things back into modern epic adult fantasy, I would say, just because I Googled best fantasy books to read right now, and it's like everywhere. So I was like, okay, I might as well try it. And I enjoyed it, but I don't know. It wasn't one that like when I closed, I was just constantly couldn't stop thinking about it or anything
Yeah.
like that. It was just, I just went on to the next thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
I
I
love
like
the two
those
books.
books. Yeah. Go ahead. Sorry, Scott.
Oh, I didn't mean to interrupt. I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I love the two books we have. I hate the novella that he released, The Slow Regards of Things, and the short story, The Lightning Tree, that he's basing this new novella off of is good but not amazing. It's based on the character of Bast, so good but not amazing. So he's making a novella of something that's already good but not amazing, and he's all excited about it.
Making it longer.
We're all like, that's not what we want. So anyway,
To buy him
Salty
another
Scott,
couple
I love
years.
it.
Yeah.
it's not what we were looking for, but that's okay. I am looking forward to the new Scott Lynch novellas, though, that he presumably is working on. That should be cool.
Yeah, I actually think those have the biggest shot of those three authors
I think
coming
so.
out when it comes to their most anticipated thing. I think those novellas we will get next year.
Start doing some fantasy bets.
I know, honestly. Draft Kings for fantasy.
Yeah. I know, Evie. It's on my shelf.
I want to read that one and the other one. It's
Vanished Birds. Yeah, it's really good. I did read that one. Yes. And I know that Matt from Matt on Books, he was just gushing about The Spear Cuts Through Water this morning on his real life show. He said, I'm going to be like Evie and start talking about this book all the time because he loved it. So
it's awesome.
Yeah. I do need to read that third Scott Lynch book, The Republic of Thieves, but I loved the first two books. I loved The Lives of Locke Lamora and Red Seas Under Red Skies. So
Yeah.
I
I just read
hope
that
not.
for the first one.
Oh man, I loved Red Seas.
Funny story about my story with his books is that Lives of Locke Lamora is the first adult fantasy book I ever read in English, ever.
Oh, yeah.
And I only made it 75% of the way through because this was like years ago, you know, like, I don't know, like 10 years ago. And I wasn't ready for adult fantasy. And then something very big happens in that book, roughly at the 75% mark. And I was so upset I put it down and never picked it back up. But I loved everything I read until then. And I know I'm going to love it when I reread it. But I'm like, I remember being traumatized. So
Yeah.
He did what?
Yellow Bastard's great. I love that series.
yeah.
Yeah. Fantastic. Let's see. I'm going to catch up here in the chat a little bit. I know people are talking about any signs of those chapters he promised.
Yeah, that was not.
Uh,
I heard about
Rock took
that.
a lot of money and produced nothing, and it is yet to talk about it. So Not good.
It's
Oh,
not very
man.
nice. Yeah.
Yeah, that is not very nice.
I know.
What
Like
else?
at least we have some wins sample chapters out there.
There are ones.
That's
there are.
true.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually never read them because I'm weird about that. I don't really like to read sample chapters at the end of books. I'd rather just
Yeah.
wait and get the whole thing.
Yeah.
There's one in my mass market of Dance with Dragons. There's a sample chapter for
Ariane, right?
Winds
Isn't
of
it?
Winter. Yeah, I think so.
Mhm.
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I
So-
do remember that. Like when I read Winds of Winter, not Winds of Winter, A Dance with Dragons.
I was gonna say, how did you do this?
Visual thinking. Yeah. Let's see. I'm getting a question here. Joanna, did you read Abercrombie standalones before? Yes, I did. I read the trilogy. I read all his standalones. I just haven't read his short story collection, Sharp Ends. I skipped that for the time being, but I'll probably come to that later on. And I enjoyed the heroes. I don't know. I enjoyed all
love it.
three.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is though my least favorite as well of all three.
Mm.
The heroes, yeah.
I'm
Yeah,
one of
I
those
think-
weirdos that the heroes I think might be.
Wait, no, not the heroes. Red Country was my least favorite. Yeah, the heroes
Red
was my
Country
favorite. Sorry,
my-
never mind.
I think a
Yeah.
lot of
Heroes,
people. Yeah.
I put an upper echelon Abercrombie, which I know isn't always popular, but
I
love all-
loved Red Country. I think that's an unpopular opinion, but
I feel like that
absolutely
will be
loved it.
my favorite of the three.
Yeah.
I've been on such
It's
a
good.
like I read the first trilogy, read Best for Cold, and then just loved them. Didn't like Best for Cold as much, but I enjoyed all of them, and I just have not gotten back to that series at all.
Mm.
It's been, I don't know why, and it's just every time I'll be like, oh, I'll read the heroes now. I just start read the first 20 pages. I'm like, not in the mood. And I really need to get past that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you were supposed to buddy read the Age of Madness trilogy together, but you need to read those other books
Yes,
first.
I know. So
Yep.
Grace actually, Grace
Mhm.
Dion is
Mhm.
she's currently reading Best Served Cold, and I think we're gonna try to buddy read
Beautiful.
Okay.
It's
the
good.
Heroes, Red Country, and then
And then
Yeah,
on
Grace
to
is
Age of
fantastic.
Madness.
Yeah.
Yeah. I loved Red Country. Alex, have you read Blood Meridian by
Oh.
Cormac McCarthy?
Like twice, 2 or 3 times.
You'll
2
see an
times
influence
definitely.
there.
Third time was I don't think I finished it. Third time.
That's
That's
lot.
what I do think that Red Country will be my favorite. Just going off of summary, because I didn't love Best Served Cold. I think
Yeah.
I don't know what I'll expect from the heroes, but the setup of Red Country sounds like right up my alley in terms of Western.
I'll get a lot of hate
Joe
from
Abercrombie.
Mike's book reviews for saying this, but yeah, Best Served Cold was my least favorite of the standalones too.
We all have
Yeah.
different orders. That's fine.
Yeah.
He always gets mad at me when I say that, or he got mad
I
at
thought
me.
it was enjoyable. I just felt like it just got repetitive.
It
to
was
a point. I just
repetitive.
because
Mhm.
there was a list, and we were going down the list. And I feel like it just got repetitive for me.
I agree. It got repetitive. There was a whole section that I felt like I didn't really feel engaged in. I think though his writing that's why I'm so impressed.
Yeah.
I'm so impressed with this trilogy with Age of Madness because I enjoyed the standalones. I still enjoyed Red Country. I mean, I still enjoyed Best Served Cold, but my goodness, I feel like the level and quality from those standalones to Age of Madness for me was a huge step up,
Yeah.
and I love
Age of
it.
Madness is by far my favorite thing he's done. It's
It's-
not.
It's so tight. It's so
I'm
tight.
so excited for it.
Yes,
Me too.
Yeah, but I do think you'll enjoy the Red Country just because of having read Blood Meridian. You'll see.
Yeah.
I think you'll see some connections there that are kind of cool.
Nice.
Yeah.
Joanna, when are you
Um,
reading Lonesome Dove? I think that's.
I
a book you're
know.
gonna
So
love.
my thought was that this year would be my Shogun year.
Mhm.
So I did that with you. I read Shogun, and then I was thinking instead of doing Shogun and Lonesome Dove in one year, I felt like that felt like a lot. So I decided I would do Shogun this year, and then maybe the next year do Lonesome Dove. But who knows? I mean, if time opens up at the end of the year, maybe I'll
Yeah.
do it.
I think it's almost. I would be shocked if you didn't adore that book. To be honest,
Yeah.
being character driven and liking Blood Meridian and all the pretty horses and stuff. I just feel like, yeah, okay.
You know,
love
it's
this one.
really surprising to me how much I've loved Westerns. Because, yeah, I loved
Yeah.
Red Country. I loved Wizard and Glass and all the Western stuff and the Dark
Mhm.
Tower
It's so good.
series.
Mhm.
I've loved Cormac McCarthy so far. Just absolutely adored it. I loved Butcher's Crossing. But also, I grew up like as a kid, I watched the Lonesome Dove miniseries on TV because my dad read the book and watched the miniseries. So I watched some of the miniseries with him. And he said it wasn't quite as good as the book, but it was still really good. So I loved that. And I was like, this is so interesting. I'm like this 9-year-old Hispanic girl connecting to these older men in a Western setting. But I also loved the Young Guns movies, Young Guns 1 and 2. And I grew up in the location where Billy the Kid was shot and murdered by Pat Garrett. And I found out, I got a whole story about how my grandparents, they sheltered Billy the Kid one night when he was wanted. Yeah. Yeah. I got a whole story about that. And so it's I have a lot of interesting connections to that. And having grown up in the Southwest. And there was that Western show on HBO. I also loved, I cannot remember the name of it. Was it Deadwood? Yes.
Yeah, Deadwood.
I loved Deadwood. I loved that show. So yeah, I love that stuff. I don't know what it is. I have no idea. Because I hear people and they're like, I don't like Westerns. I'm like, I get it. I don't know why I do. I get it, but I don't know why I do. I don't know. It's a vibe thing, I guess. Yeah. What about you, Joana? You probably don't like Westerns.
I mean, it's not that I don't like them. It's just that they're not a thing here. Like,
yeah,
I would have to go out of my way to watch something like that, and I just don't.
Yeah,
so.
That's totally understandable.
But to us, to us, I'm not generalizing, right? Because Europe is big, but to a lot of Europeans, I think Westerns is just like, this is America as we see it. You know how Alan says, if I go to London and there's not a chimney sweep in the street, blah blah blah. This is how we see America. If we don't go there and we don't see a Western, it's not America. So, then again, I lived in Idaho for 3 years, so I think for me, my representation of America is pretty accurate. I felt like I was in a Western sometimes. I was like, what is this?
It's an interesting thing. So Philip says that he liked Westerns so much, and really,
that's so cute.
Philip and cowboy boots.
My dad was like that. My dad only wore cowboy boots his whole life, but my dad also grew up in a ranch in Mexico. Yeah, that's so funny. I didn't know that about you, Philip. I'm always learning new things about Philip that are so fascinating.
Should be Philip's next author picture, just him in all cowboy get up.
Yes, I want to see Cowboy Philip. Please bring Cowboy Dr. Fantasy out. That'd be fantastic. Yeah. It'd be a good look. It'd be a good look, I think. So, yeah. What kind of things? So, my next question for you all, what kind of things are you loving in books right now? So, I guess for me, I'll say I'm having a Western thing right now. I love Westerns. There's a lot of other things I could say, but what is it you're loving in books right now? And actually, I'm going to start with Alex and I'll go back around to Scott and Joanna, because I loved your Memories of Ice review. That was incredible. It was a fairly long video.
It was a long video, and I was trying to cut it down. And I was like, it's a spoiler video. I feel like anyone's watching it. Yeah. So
what I always tell people, because I gave myself this advice, so I always give it to other people. I'm like, if you're reading Malazan and you're doing videos on it, don't put pressure on yourself to feel like you have to talk about everything, because there's just no way you can.
Yeah, there's
just too much in those books. Yeah. But talk about what's meaningful to you, because that's what's exciting for us, to hear what's meaningful to you and why. And everything you talked about, you covered the book so well, but you also made it meaningful. Like, it was meaningful to you clearly. So
yeah, I'm trying to think what's the most, I guess right now so far, year of 2023, I think just huge epic fantasy has been really big for me, but not like the traditional type. So obviously like Song of Ice and Fire, Malazan, Realm of the Otherlings, finished that, and now starting Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn. And I just feel like it's the epic fantasy that really is, I don't want to say dark, but it's because it's not dark, but I feel, I don't know, it will throw curveballs at you. It'll take left turns when you're not expecting it. It'll really put you in like challenging situations as a reader, and puts the characters in tough situations, and they are growing from that. I love epic fantasy series that like ridiculously big and vast, but also have those really intimate character moments. I feel like that is why I love A Song of Ice and Fire so much because I just feel like the character work is so good, but the world feels so big. And so I'm really enjoying that quite a bit. And I think that's also why I enjoyed Prince of Nothing. And it's also why I liked the second book in the Prince of Nothing the most out of those three. And it's why I'm excited for Aspect Emperor. I don't know. I feel like on the fantasy side of things, that's what I'm really just connecting with, because I don't know. I like going on the journey from the first book, being like introduced to all this stuff, following all the chaos along the way, and then seeing what happens at the end. And like, I also like having the rug kind of pulled out underneath me, and things just totally being thrown out the window and stuff changing. So like totally different type of series, but I just read Changes in Dresden Files, and that changed everything. So I feel like I love that for that reason. I just like when authors do that, but do it in a way that it makes sense and it feels like a natural inevitability for the story and the sense of how it's set up.
Well said. Yeah, I love that too.
Yeah.
I'm glad I could
Good luck following up that.
Yeah.
Thanks, Alex.
Yeah, no, I think Martin is
No
so
problem.
good at that because he can introduce a setting. I mean, even in A Feast for Crows, he's constantly introducing these new settings, and they feel so immersive and they're so detailed. And you could tell he borrows elements from our world, but he still changes things around. But at the same time, he's doing it through the character perspective and bringing you into their mindset and into their inner dialogue. And I just think it's so fascinating. But also, I love what you said about just throwing the wildness at you too as a reader, just not being afraid to hold, not holding back, taking those risks at the same time as you're setting up something big and epic.
Yeah.
Because it can be easy to stay safe with that a little bit,
Yeah. In the comments, Murphy brought up Dandelion Dynasty, and I read that last year, and I love that series for the same reason. I think that it's just 4 books, but that story is epic and just like goes in places that you just don't expect, covers a whole bunch of time. You have those huge epic fantasy steampunkish moments, and then you have like the really close character development, spending a lot of time with characters doing stuff that you just wouldn't expect, and the payoff is excellent. So I really love that series for a lot of the same reasons.
I cannot wait to read that series.
It's so
going to be
good.
starting that. Yeah.
Scott and I are buddy
Fanboy
reading
for
it.
it.
You could buddy with us if you wanted.
I'm going to be buddy reading it with Philip, and I need to touch base with him on when, but I'm really excited to probably later in the year, because we're also going to be buddy reading Aspect Emperor with Alex too. So need to figure that out too. But
Too many buddy reads.
I'll be right back.
I'm kind of like overwhelmed with the buddy reads right
Really,
now.
yeah.
But I'm super excited about it though, and I'd love to hear your thoughts though as you're reading it, because I've heard so many great things. I've heard book 1 is incredible, and then I keep hearing that book 2 just takes it to a new level as well. What about you, Scott? What are you loving in books right now? I know that you've been really promoting the Sun Eater series, as well as Book of the New Sun. That's another one that you've been reading.
That's what I'm loving. So for years, I've wanted to read this thing, and I'm not smart enough for this series, and I've continually said that. And I told Rocchio this, and he's like, well, and that's Sun Eater author, Christopher Rocchio. He said, no, you'll be fine. And I said, okay, well, if I'm going to read it, I need you to come on my channel after each book and explain to me what I just read. So that's what I've been doing, is relying on him to filter and explain it to me like I'm a 2-year-old, exactly what's going on. So Gene Wolfe, the author of the Sun Eater, he's an absolute genius. Most beautiful writing, I think, this side of Robin Hobb. It's absolutely gorgeous prose. And he ties together Greek and Roman myth with nonfiction, with legend, with all this other stuff. And it's great because Christopher Rocchio has a background in classics. That's what he got his degree in. So he can explain to me, no, this was that, and this was that, and this is what he's trying to say. Because I'm just like, well, I know the guy has a sword, and that's what I got out of it. And there's like 10 different levels of deepness there. So that's what I'm enjoying, is going through that and someone who is definitely much, much more intelligent than me, which I like, being able to explain what's going on. The Book of the New Sun is incredible. I know that Philip and Matt on Books are also reading it right now, so their stuff.
It's really high up on my priority list. I want to get there.
Highly encourage. It requires a lot of patience. There's going to be plenty of times where, and maybe I'm just speaking for myself, plenty of times where you read a passage and you're like, I don't know if this is right now or if we're in the past or we're talking about somebody else's memory. I don't know what's going on. So you have to have some patience to get through it.
Cool.
It is one of the more rewarding reading experiences I've ever had, and being able to talk to an author that I admire greatly and someone I consider a personal friend about, and it's his favorite series and a big part of his inspiration and motivation for his own series, that is second to none. So that's what I'm enjoying right now.
Oh, that's so special. And it's so awesome to have somebody who's like can help you with that, help you process things. Because I understand like exactly what you said. That's what I've heard from Matt. I know that it's kind of a mystery and you have to be okay being in the dark for a while. And the gorgeous prose. I keep hearing so many people talk about.
Incredible. So good.
It makes me so excited to get to that. I think I'm going to be reading that next year. That's somewhere in my reading plans for next year. Yeah. So as far as everybody telling me that Alan is going to be mad, well, Alan always has amnesia about how many buddy reads I've had with him and how many. I actually wrote out.
You've never had a buddy read with him.
Gosh. And I message him. I'm like, so we're buddy reading this. When are we going to buddy read this? And then he doesn't answer. So take that, Alan, if you're watching. But yeah, no. And I wrote down a list of all the books I've read because of Alan, and it possibly has exceeded any other booktuber.
That's
so,
awesome.
Alan, just take that. For anybody who's telling me Alan's going to be mad. But anyway, Joana, what about you? What are you loving in books right now? What have you been reading? I know that you're taking a little bit of a break right now.
Yeah, I think this year has been me cycling through series and trying to actually finish them. So I've been reading Realm of the Elderlings. I've been reading, of course, The Song of Ice and Fire with you guys. And then I'm reading The Greatcoats. And basically that's all I've been reading. And just reading one book in each and then going back and then, 3. That's how I've been doing it. And then I throw in some like random stuff, maybe sometimes like just something light to cleanse the palate and then move on. And I think that's what I've been loving. It's exactly what Alex said in a less eloquent way. It's that the whole immersing yourself in the world and with characters, getting to know them and loving them, and just being in these epic worlds with these characters that you just learn to love. And that's what I've been loving. And so I think that I'm coming to a close on, I have one book left in Greatcoats. I have 2 books left in Song of Ice and Fire, and then, well, thank God I still have 5 books left in Realm of the Elderlings, but then it's going to be starting a new series. So I think Dandelion is up next with Scott soon.
Oh my goodness. That's exciting.
Yeah.
So I'm excited for you because I remember last year, I think it was last year, you had a spreadsheet of how many series you were in the middle of. Am I right? Yeah.
Yeah.
Wasn't it? It was pretty high. Do you remember?
It was high, but you know what I did? I deleted the whole thing, and I was like, I'm done. I'm starting anew. And some series I just decided to DNF because I just knew I was never going to get back to them. Yeah. And if I had to restart them, I just said, okay, if you have to restart them anyway, then we're starting fresh. So
this makes me so happy. I'm so happy to hear that.
That's awesome that I did that.
Yeah.
Sorry?
What series did you DNF? What are some of the ones that you decided to cut loose on?
Honestly, probably all the YA stuff I was in the middle of and I knew I was never going to get back to. Yeah. And for example, I knew I had to reread Jade City to actually read the whole series because I'd started Jade War and I wasn't as immersed in it as I wanted to be.
Gotcha.
And so I know I'm going to love that series, but I know I have to reread. So
I'm rereading Jade City possibly via audio because I got the audiobook on hold on Libby. I didn't like Jade City when that's my most unpopular opinion.
I really love the trilogy, but I understand when folks say they don't. Or whatever. I had a great time. I read it last month.
I'm going to try again though. I think I'm going to try again though. And I've heard that the audiobooks are fantastic. So
but it was good. Fantastic, I think might be a little much, but I thought they were good. I thought he did a pretty good job.
And
I have Murphy's mad at me because Alan isn't here to be mad at me. So all caps anger. So funny. Sorry. Has to be all caps. Okay. Yeah. Are there so you DNF'd a whole bunch of YA series? That's really
Yeah.
interesting. I'm possibly going to make a video at some point soon on thoughts on the whole YA. I know it's not a genre, but
Yeah,
the YA
demographic.
category,
Yeah.
because I've been developing a lot of thoughts about this, and I'm curious, do you all read YA? Probably not. It seems like everybody here just reads adult.
Not much anymore.
I read
No,
A.R. Witham's book. That was the last one
That's
that I
YA.
did.
Mhm.
And I like that, but I don't. In general, like I was already old when the term YA came up, so I missed the boat.
Me too.
I was gonna bring that up. I think like when I was the age bracket that YA is targeted to now, I think YA was very different than what present day YA fantasy is. I just think, I mean, what was it, like His Dark Materials and Harry Potter? Like that's so different from what is now being pushed as YA that I don't even know. I haven't read one of anything in the modern YA category, so I just no idea.
It's just super hard to relate, I find, And I was still reading a lot of YA. I have a lot of YA on my shelf just because, it's, I don't know, it's like stuff I'd bought back then and I haven't read. And I always thought, with this being like not my first language, maybe it's easier. But I just realized that I can't relate to the characters anymore. I'm too old, man. It's true. We're too old. And like the 16-year-olds, it's like the world is ending, but do I love this guy? And like,
right.
I just don't give a crap. Like seriously, move along. So
that's interesting. Yeah. I think it's interesting because I did that. My last video was, like I said, the second books that deliver in fantasy series. And I feel like, wow, there are so many adult fantasy books or series where I love the second book or going the middle section. We were talking about like the middle of the journey and how that could be so amazing. In fact, like the Dark Tower series, I know that Scott and we both love, and I think you too, Alex, right? I don't know, what's your favorite of that series?
Drawing of the Three is my favorite. And I don't know if that's a hot take, but that's my favorite of the series.
Well, I think it's a brilliant book, and my favorite
Wizard and Glass is probably
my
second one. Yeah, it's like right behind.
Yeah, I think I would probably rate them Wizard and Glass, and then Drawing of the Three, and then The Wastelands. But those three books are some of my favorite books ever. I love
them. So good. Yeah,
I didn't love books 6 and 7 as much, but I ultimately like the ending. But 6, I especially struggled with. I don't know why, but Song of Susanna just wasn't my jam. I don't know.
I feel like a lot of people do.
I liked Song of Susanna just because it reminded me of the song, like the way it was structured. I don't know. It was something about it that I liked, and I liked the character of Susanna and what was going on in her storyline. That's a tangent, but all I was going to say about this in relation to YA is that it was interesting because I did that video, and Ben from Bingus Khan, Books with Bingus Khan, he did one too. He asked me, "Can I do one too?" Because he had like 19 choices, and so he did his version of that, which was really good. And then he followed up with a video on book 2s that were a step down from book 1. And I didn't do that kind of video, but I was thinking in my head, it would pretty much be almost every YA series I've read.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of a challenge too, is I feel like a lot of YA series I've read, it seems like the world building has not been as complex or complex enough to inspire more development in a second book. And then usually where the second book leads is to more like what you said, Joana, the trope of the world is falling apart and I don't know if this guy loves me, like that. So,
yeah, that's weird.
I think actually what you're saying is interesting because when you earlier were saying, Alex and Scott, when you were saying that you like middles a lot, I was thinking now that we're talking, I think I'm catching up on all these adult fantasy series. And that's probably why I haven't loved middles as much as maybe you two, because I haven't finished as many adult fantasy series. Maybe. And I think maybe that will change because, for example, Storm of Swords, best book ever written, right? And it's literally, right now it's literally in the middle. So yeah, it's just, I think maybe it's the adult versus YA thing. Maybe you're right about that.
Could be.
Yeah. But I do like YA, just FYI. And as far as what you're saying, Jared, about Gaiman having excellent YA stories, but I think they're standalones mostly.
Mm.
You guys have Coraline.
So-
I've always loved Coraline. That's
Yeah.
that is why I would say it's just
It
dark
is.
YA.
It is YA. Yeah, and I
Weird
love the
YA.
movie. Oh my goodness,
Yeah.
the movie is so good.
I need to read more Game, and I've only read American Gods and part of a Nancy Boyce, and they were fine. I wasn't anything that I thought
Try like
very good.
the one that everyone talks about, Ocean at the End of the Lane. I haven't read
That's the
that.
one I
but
wanna get.
I do want to. Yeah, I do want to read that.
Highly recommend it. Highly recommend. Actually, that was the audiobook. The Ocean at the End of the Lane audiobook
Mhm.
was the audiobook that made me a believer in audiobooks.
Yeah.
I wasn't
Wow.
an audiobook believer until I listened to that, and it was narrated by Neil Gaiman. And at the time, I didn't know anything about audiobooks. I just so I've checked it out the CDs from my library because I didn't even know about apps or anything. So I listened to it on 1-time speed. So it took me everybody's like, oh, you can finish it in a sitting. I'm like, took me several hours and
Yeah.
days. But at 1-time speed. But I remember I just didn't want to stop driving. I was like, I need to go to the store so I could listen to this audiobook because it's so good. And I would just I felt like I was in another world. I felt so immersed while I was driving. I was like, wow, this is just
I've heard that.
amazing.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
I've heard
I
he's a
love
really
it.
good narrator.
He's a brilliant
Neil Gaiman.
narrator. Yeah,
Yeah.
he's a brilliant narrator. Yeah, so we talked about things that we're loving I've heard great things about that. That is a good point. Thank you all. The Neil Schusterman one. I have heard good things about that particular trilogy. I haven't read it though. So yeah, I'm open to being wrong about that kind of stuff, but it is an interesting topic for me because like you said,
Definitely.
I think like Scott and Alex, I'm like, it just wasn't a thing when I was young. I wish it were a thing when I was young because I think I would have benefited from that. Honestly.
Yeah, like the marketing around it alone is just so different. I mean,
Mhm.
like its own thing now.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. I'm going to go ahead and catch up on the chat. It's funny because my 2 nieces won't read a book unless there's a romance while the world is falling apart. It could be a fun trope, I think just different stages of life want different. Yeah, absolutely. It's funny because that trope reminds me of a lot of the love songs from the 80s, like the pop songs. If you listen to a lot of pop songs from the 80s, it's like, we're going to make it, like
About
we
to
can
live
stop,
out with you.
that
Yeah,
kind of
that
thing.
kind of stuff. Yeah.
And I love it. It's so over the top, but it's a thing, why not? Yeah, I love the Dark Tower series. It's fantastic.
Same.
Yeah, really good.
Lots of love for The Ocean at the End of the Lane. Neil Gaiman is such a great writer. Yeah. Oh, I haven't not read the Graveyard Book, but I will try that at some point, as well as Norse mythology. So what about deal breakers? Are there any deal breakers in books things that don't work for you or that you need a certain way? So we talked about that a little bit with the YA trope thing, but are there any other deal breakers that it's like, I think I'll pass on this?
I think if I can't connect to the characters,
Yeah.
after full book 1, I would say, then I will stop with the series. I just think, especially if it's like a long series, if I just have no feeling towards any of the characters, even if I like the world building and the writing or whatever else the story has, I probably just won't be motivated to continue. So I think that's a big one for me, just because there's so much else that's out there that I feel like I would connect with more.
Mm-hmm.
I don't have any real hangups, I guess. I'm often made fun of because I'm overly positive about everything. Mike over Mike's book reviews always says, well, if Scott didn't like it, that is not a good sign. So whether that's a movie or a book or whatever, I'm not hard to please, I guess. I don't know. I'm willing to try anything, and I have certain things that I especially love, but as far as stuff that I hate, I think I would go about it.
I think that's good.
That's
I kind of feel the same way. I feel like I definitely like more than a lot of people like, but it might just be because I'm just trying a bunch of different things, and then I'm finding stuff that I didn't even know I would like, and then it just turns into a whole nother situation.
I've noticed that, Alex. I've noticed that you seem to land pretty usually on the positive side when it comes to
I also think that with BookTube, and one thing that has definitely helped is because of all the buddy reads and read-alongs, I feel like so much of it has been orchestrated to a point that I'm really only reading stuff that I'm excited to read. So if there's if like if there's a book I'm excited to read and it doesn't hit that mark, unless it's just completely something that I really did not like, I'll still be like, okay, I liked it for these reasons, and I know why people like it, but for me, it just didn't work.
Mhm.
I don't find myself like being as spontaneous picking up random books that I probably would have a better chance of not liking, just because there's so many things that I'm reading that I'm more excited to read. So I don't know. There's definitely a trade-off, but
Yeah, yeah. I think I tend to love a lot of the same books though that you love at the same time. So and it kind of helps
yeah.
too because I mean, I feel like I don't usually get around to reading as many books as many booktubers, but it's helpful because I do know certain people like you and I know like if Jimmy loves a book, there's probably a really good chance I'll love a book or he can let me know. So it's kind of helpful to know what you're into and the kinds of things you gravitate towards. And there definitely are deal breakers for me. I will
Mhm.
say that we were talking about grimdark kind of content or dark content in books a little while ago. And I know for me personally, and I'll just say really quickly in case Evie's still here. Bye, Evie. Thank you so much for showing up in the chat. But I will say here that like I like darkness in a story and subversion of tropes, I should say. Like Prince of Nothing, for example, by R. Scott Baker, that subverts a lot of tropes. Abercrombie, in his series, he subverts a lot of fantasy tropes. Malazan, Book of the Fallen, it definitely, in some
Definitely.
ways, even though it's fantasy, it's still a critique of fantasy in a lot of ways. But I never feel like they're doing it just to show
Shock
they can
value.
do it. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There's always a deeper purpose behind it.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
that I love. But when I s and so if somebody's trying to just sell me and maybe that's not a book thing, maybe it's just a marketing thing. If I hear like marketers saying, "Those who love grim, dark, and edgy, and this and that," I'm like, "That's not enough for me," you know? Like, that's not why I love those books. And
Right.
so I feel like they're trying to target it to me, but I'm like, "But that's not exactly the reason why." It's like,
Yeah.
there has to be
I
something
feel
deeper.
I feel the same way. Like, and when there's a series of like, oh, this is the darkest thing I've ever read, but it's really just sounds like because of the content, and it doesn't really sound like it's a natural part of the story, or it's more like the author's trying to
Makes
just
sense.
shove whatever he can into the story.
Mhm.
Then I'm almost like not interested in picking it up,
Mhm.
at least currently. And I'd rather I don't know because I love dark, like I love dark story. I love the Prince of Nothing aspect of it. I've heard it only gets darker, and I'm really excited for that, for as much as you can be. But um I think there is absolutely a balance when it comes to how authors execute it, because I've definitely tried reading some books that just come swinging with all the content and everything, and it's just like I don't even care about these characters enough to really care about the dark stuff
Yeah.
that's happening in these.
That's
So
fair.
Yeah. I would say that too. I think that for me, if I'm not connected to the characters, I give up, because it's happened to me that I was reading a book and then all of a sudden I thought you don't care. Then I just put it down and it's over for me. So yeah,
Yeah.
it is
Yeah.
unfortunate because I feel like not everyone can write as amazing characters as some authors do. But
yeah,
when I see how much I love some characters of, where I'm like I would. The other day I told you guys when we were doing the Storm of Swords, I think, live show, that I was on the train listening to the audiobook and I literally had tears in my eyes because I wish these characters were real somewhere and I could go visit them and hug them. And like if I don't get that from another book, then I just well, too bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Especially when books like that set the bar so high.
I know, because it's possible, it's doable. So not by everyone, and I'm not saying everyone needs to be Robin Hobb or George R. Martin or Brandon Sanderson or Joe Abercrombie, but you can't have them here and then everyone else down here. There needs to be something in between.
Sure.
So.
Yeah.
Mm.
It's also interesting because I feel like genre plays a role, and I don't like
Yes.
necessarily categorizing things into a box, but I do feel like if I go into a certain type of genre like science fiction, I'm way less hung up on if I like the characters or not.
Yeah.
I'm way more
Definitely.
focused on
Ideas.
like what's going on in this book, like what's everything the author's trying to explore. Whereas if I'm looking at like an epic fantasy story that has a lot of similar beats that we've seen in other things, I need to at least enjoy the character somewhat, because I'll just get bored, and that's fun. But I
No,
don't know.
that's
I
true.
feel like the same thing can be with horror and historical fiction stuff. They all have their different strengths that I like look for when I go into those types of books.
Yeah. Yeah. I totally agree with that. I think the genre can affect things. And I'll just say, like, and even to your point, Scott, about like, well, I just, I'm not a hater. But I think it's also, that the best author, I always say this, so I'm sorry if I sound like a broken record, but I feel like the best authors can prove me wrong about anything
Mhm.
that I think I don't like.
that's
Anything.
Yep.
Yeah. So I like this comment here. If the narrative voice isn't keeping my attention, I think that plays a bigger role than we realize too.
Definitely.
Something I've
Yeah,
also
I would agree.
become very sensitive to is tone and style. And
Style.
I didn't realize what a big deal this was to me until I think this last couple of years. And I read this wonderful article that I know Philip Chase has talked about quite a bit by Ursula K. Le Guin called From Elfland
yeah.
to Poughkeepsie.
Oh yeah.
And it's all about prose really, and about how prose is style and world building. It's all interconnected. And I think she also gives the best definition of what style in books is. But she also it also became really clear to me how, like, she also talks about using archaicisms and how you can't just fake it. Like, you have to know how to use those things. You have to know how to do certain things well. And she invites readers not to be fooled either, to actually be critical about those things. And I think she has such a good point in that article. I think there could be room to argue certain things. And I know Philip did in his video essay about it, but I think that it's interesting to me because I noticed that when authors get it right, they have a certain cohesive, authorial voice
Mhm.
that, like, for example, with George R. R. Martin, I feel like I have to just bring it up. With George R. R. Martin, I could read like, for example, I was saying this recently in a conversation with a friend. I mean, when I'm reading Arya's perspective, I'm reading from an 11-year-old girl, but
Mhm.
not only does the voice sound authentic to this 11-year-old girl perspective, it feels authentic to this world,
Right.
to
Yeah.
this time, and it also feels like it fits the style, and it not only feels like an authentic 11-year-old girl, it feels like this specific
Mhm.
11-year-old girl. So he does all these things and it all works. And you get that whether he's writing in Cersei's perspective or in Bran's perspective or John's perspective. I feel like there's a distinct voice, but there's still something cohesive. There's still
Mhm.
something that feels
Yeah.
like his style and that world and
Yeah.
that tone. So I think that that's important. And so a lot of people talk about how A Song of Ice and Fire is, and I promise this won't just be a Song of Ice and Fire gush because I'm
Not gonna
so
hurt
high
our
on the
feelings.
series right
Or
now.
either of us.
But a lot of people talk about it being grimdark or being overly dark. There are dark things that happen in the story. I could see an argument for it being grimdark. However, there are beautiful things that happen too. I mean, there are very
Oh
touching
yeah.
moments, very emotional moments. And I feel like the tone still feels cohesive with his voice as an author.
Mhm.
So I feel like that's an important thing for me because I have read some
Yeah.
books where suddenly they'll bring the dark, edgy thing and it doesn't fit. The tone seems like it clashes somehow. Something
Yeah.
about the style doesn't quite work in the story.
I think
Yeah.
that's something I would agree with that. I feel like a lot of authors I've really enjoyed lately have a very distinct style about their writing. Even if the certain books or perspectives, whatever they're writing, differs, and you could tell the difference. Like for example, Robin Hobb, all the Fitz books are one thing, and then you have Live
Yep.
Ship Traders, and obviously you have a different point of view structure going on. But the style overall, like the overall tone of the story, feels the same. It feels like it's all part of the realm, like the same author and same realm of the Elderlings. But the individual perspectives between Fitz and then all the characters in the third person books feel so like to the core that person that it's talking about. Another author that I've been reading very slowly, but have really enjoyed is China Mieville. So I just read The Scar, which is the second book in the Boslog trilogy. I guess they're kind of standalones in the same world, but like the style, it's like totally different set of characters from Perdido Street Station, but the tone and style are very similar. And it was really nice picking up that book and being introduced to all these new characters, but I still feel like I was right back into this gritty, nasty world that he had introduced me to in the first book. So that's a great point. I think plays a much bigger role than a lot of people realize when they're reading.
Yeah, it's not an easy thing, I think, for an author to develop that skill too. I really have to check out that author sometime because I keep hearing about him this last year.
You should.
And Miavel. I'm saying that right.
Yep.
Yeah.
Perdido Street Station. Yeah.
And by the way, Natural Born Killers, that takes me back. That takes me back. My goodness. I haven't seen that movie in so many years. I vaguely remember it. Yeah. What is a book or series you can't wait to start? I know my answer.
Trying to think of something I haven't said yet. Aspect Emperor I'm excited for, but
yeah,
I feel like
I'm excited about that too. My answer is The Lions of Alrasan by GGK.
Yeah, so good.
So I don't know if I'm going to have time to get to it at the end of the month, but I might start it at the very, very end. It'll definitely be a carryover though into July if I get to it.
I'm reading Sarantine Mosaic now. Good stuff. I got Sailing Test done, and I'm working on Lord of Emperors. His writing is quite good.
Who's the author again?
Yeah.
GGK, same guy.
Oh, same author. What's the name of the book again? I'm sorry.
It's a duology, the Sarantine Mosaic. It's
okay.
One of Jake's favorite things. It's Rockio's favorite duology. And I can see why everybody loves it. It is very, very good. I just completed the first book, and I just started the second book this morning. So.
Yeah, Lions is the only GGK book I've read, but I loved it. So I'm very excited to read his other stuff. I think, Scott, you were talking about Book of the Sun. That's one I am very excited to read.
I can't wait for you to, so we can talk about it, and you can tell me also what I didn't understand. So.
There will definitely be things that will go right over my head. Don't worry.
I think
Stormlight too. I haven't read Stormlight.
Oh yeah,
I'm excited for that. I'm excited to see what I think about it. I'm kind of nervous to see what I think about it too. I think I'll enjoy it, but
I'm curious.
It's just one of those very popular series I haven't read.
I will also be doing R. Scott Baker this year. I have read The Darkness That Comes Before, but it's been 10 years or 12 years, or whenever it first came out. So I know a lot about it. So I will be reading that, Prince of Nothing and Aspect Emperor kind of throughout the rest of the year. So I guess that, and I want to be doing some Alistair Reynolds this year. Because I've never. So.
Wow, nice. That's a nice list. Yeah. Any for you, Joana?
Yeah, I think Dandelion I'm really excited for, and Sun Eater. I mean, we're with the Sun Eater crew here, so.
True. Yeah, big Sun Eater promoters here.
Yeah. Yeah, those I'm really excited about, and I do want to read R. Scott Baker as well, but I don't know if I'll get to it. But it is on my list of things, on my long list of books I'd like to start this year, but.
Yeah.
Seeing how my reading is going, I don't know.
I'll be starting in June. Let me know if you want to tag along.
Yeah.
No. June is too soon.
June is too soon. Yeah. The only book I ever consciously decided absolutely not was The End of Time of Contempt. So
that's Witcher.
I haven't read any of The Witcher.
I haven't either.
Never been drawn to that series.
I've read all of them, like every single one that's published. And
are you a fan? Do you like them?
Very mid. When I was reading them, I was excited to be reading. I was excited to be reading them. I mean, because I just wanted to be immersed in a fantasy series.
Sure.
And I went my enjoyment. I definitely enjoyed the first two short story collections quite a bit. With the actual main series, my enjoyment was like this.
I've heard.
Like, every other day I would be reading it, be like, this is so exciting. And then the next day, oh, this is just not it. And so I went up and down and went up and down so much. I didn't feel totally satisfied with the ending. It could have been expectations or with that last book that was published. And but at the same time, I'm still glad I read it. I'm still glad I read those books. And the characters stay with me. They still stay with me. I still have a strong sense of Geralt. I still have a strong sense of Yennefer and of Ciri and of Dandelion. And I really liked the characters. I thought their interactions with one another was really good. it's just the overall story kind of lost me. It didn't
Mm.
really. It had some good ideas. It just didn't really bring things together in the most
That's
satisfactory
one
way.
I'm debating whether I should DNF or not, because I read the first 2 short story collections and I really liked them. I read the first full-length novel and it was okay.
Blood
So
of
I don't
Elves,
know.
yeah.
I really don't know if I.
I've heard even from hardcore fans, it seems like they like the short stories and they like the video games. That's what I've heard. Nobody seems to
Yeah.
like the show all that much, maybe a little bit, and nobody seems to like the novels. So if
Yeah.
that is supposed to be getting me involved in the world, I don't think that's
Not a good
I read-
sales pitch.
I read the books when my husband was playing the video game, The Witcher
Uh-huh.
3, and he's played actually the other two since then. He really enjoyed. Oh my goodness, I think he had a way better time playing that video game than I did reading the series. But
Game
him
is so
playing
good.
that game was like the best music soundtrack for
Oh,
reading
okay.
the series. I love the music to that game, by the way. But no,
Yes.
the game seems so much
Yeah,
fun.
the game is awesome.
Yeah, so I would
Pour
recommend going that route.
Tons of hours into that.
Yeah, so did my husband. He was on that game for it seemed like for months. for a while.
excellent news from Mary here. Ship of Magic is fantastic. Good, good.
Oh,
It is.
I need to start
Yes.
that trilogy
Yes,
too.
you do.
Yes.
I
you
know,
do.
I know, I know.
Correct.
I've already committed to so many things. I don't think it's gonna happen this year.
Dump all the plans, go with Hob. That's the best.
Yeah,
I'm just kidding, obviously.
I know. I think everybody wants me to. At one point, I asked people, I'm like, should I kept asking people in live shows, I'm like, should I read the Live Ship Traders series next or Age of Madness? And everybody's like, Live Ship Traders. And I went with Age of Madness. But it's just because Age of Madness is so close to the end of First Law
I get that. 100%.
that I'm like, I just have to I have to close it
There's
off.
no
you
bad
know?
choice there. Those are both
No.
fantastic choices.
Yeah.
And I know I'm going to get to Ship of Magic. It's on my shelf. I know I'm going to read it. There's no way I'm not going to read it. And there's no way I'm not going to love it. I know even Philip told me his favorite series of all time is Moaz and Book of the Fallen. I've read that whole series, but he has told me that he thinks I will love that. He thinks that Realm of the Elderlings will be my favorite series. So I feel like that's saying a lot. Yeah. I'm really
I kept
excited
telling
for
my friend
that.
Madison Goodyear, I kept telling her, if there's ever been one series for one person, it's Live Ship Traders for you. And I kept telling her that, And she finally read it, and then she ended up binging the rest of the series because she fell in love with Live Ship Traders. And
Yeah,
she
she
liked
was-
part,
I guess.
but she didn't.
Yeah.
That was the tipping point. So
I love hearing her thoughts about that. I know I watched a recent video of hers where she talked about how she wanted to reread Farseer as soon as she finished the Realm of the Elderlings and how different the experience was rereading Farseer after finishing the
is.
whole Realm of the Elderlings.
Oh yeah.
So this makes me very, very
Can only
excited.
imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I love trope subversion and stories that are just different. Yeah, I think that's beautiful. Love that too. Yeah. I think it's because I was just kind of going off about I don't know that I like trope subversion for the sake of subverting the trope more so
Yeah.
than having a purpose behind it. But
Yeah.
but yeah, I
It
mean,
just-
I can understand.
It kind of took off in popularity. I feel like with Game of Thrones and stuff.
It did.
A
Yeah.
lot of authors just started doing it because it was the new cool thing to do,
Mhm.
and it's really, it's so satisfying when someone does it so in such a way that you're just really not expecting it, and it's just like everything's pulled away from you, and just like, what the heck? I
Al,
love that. Yeah.
Alan, you're late.
So
to
many.
being mad.
10 buddy. We actually played 10 buddy reads without.
That's right. Yeah. Yeah. That's so funny. Forgot what I was going to ask. That's so funny. Alan just distracted me. So,
Easy to get. Easy to miss.
Yeah.
I'm just going to look at the chat here for a minute.
yeah, I tried to read Go Straight Station a long time ago when it first came out, and I ended up DNFing it, thinking I'd pick it up again at some point, and I never have. But
Yeah, it's weird. It's like super weird, and like kind of all over the place. But his writing is really good. In my opinion. I think the Scar is tighter. I feel like the Scar is a more his writing improved a lot between Perdido and that one. It's also like nautical fantasy in a really weird way, and I just like nautical fantasy a lot and don't
Me
get a lot of
too.
it. So
Yeah.
when it's done well, it's just
I
something.
don't
that
remember
sticks with
much
me.
of it except the world was super cool. It's like the carcass of a dead animal or something, right? Am I remembering?
They have
wrong?
like the world, like people within the world are made of bugs and humans. There's like humans with beetle heads and cacti people that are like walking cactuses and
Has
stuff.
one head.
What?
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
sounds cool.
Sure.
I
That does
Yeah.
sound cool.
now.
It's very bizarre, and it's the fan art is there's not enough of it, but the stuff you can find is just really it's pretty cool.
I need
You're
to
just
look
like,
that
wow,
up.
I can't believe.
That sounds fun. That sounds fun. Kyle, I thought we were friends.
You were betrayed.
I am. Yeah. Yeah. But yes, Lions of Alberson, if anybody wants to join in that, that's pretty much like going to be a channel wide buddy read or grimoire buddy read. I think we're going to be talking about it over there if anybody wants to join in. But I'm starting that at the end of the month. And I think there's also going to be a buddy read if anybody wants to join in for Gates of Fire. Is that the right
Oh, okay.
historical fiction book?
Oh yeah, doing that in June.
Hopefully
Yeah,
we can do that next month. Yeah.
Pressfield. It's the Battle at Thermopylae and the Spartans.
Yeah.
300.
Mhm.
But
Yeah.
not 300 the movie.
Right.
And I know I told you about that, Alan, because we talked about it on the last way read. So,
Yeah, I feel like I remember.
yeah. Alan. Yeah. Cool. Oh, Yolene's in the chat.
Hey, Yolene. Good to see
Hello.
you.
Yeah, Yolene. The Serentine Mosaic.
That's the one I'm reading.
I think
Duology.
I think RJ is reading it right now too, and I think he just started Lord of Emperors, and he was just like the first chapter is awesome.
The first chapter is
Wow.
incredible. That is correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm excited to read that. That'll probably be next. That well, actually, I signed up for a buddy read for Under Heaven with him, so that is gonna probably be my next one. And
I
then
think
probably
what
Serentine
Rockio
Mosaic.
told me is that Sailing to Strontium, the first book's an 8 out of 10, but the
Mhm.
second book, Lord of Emperors, is a 15 out of 10, I think is how he rated them.
Wow.
And I think Jake says something similar. So yeah, it's phenomenal so far. I like the first book a lot, but it felt like a lot of setup. But the second book, I'm expecting to adore. Really, really good.
It's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. What has been your all's favorite book of the year so far? Do you have one yet?
Oh, it's such a tough question.
Book of the New Sun, if I can cheat and use 4 books as a single book.
Yeah.
Or how it's supposed to be.
Oh,
They're all like
we'll do
250 pages, so it's about 1,000-page novel together. But yeah, it's pretty easily been my favorite thing I've read this year.
that.
Nice.
Let me see.
I feel like I have to say Assassin's Fate because just
Yeah.
as Assassin's Fate. But I think right up there would be so far Lines of Alberson and Memories of Ice, probably. I just love
Nice.
both of those as well.
I
But
can't wait
Assassin's
to
Fate,
read
I
them.
just think is just
Next
I don't know,
level.
it's like not even a book itself. It's like it is a book, and I'm judging it as a book, but I'm also judging it as the end to the whole series. So it has another
To tell
level
people
to
it retroactively makes all 15 previous books better somehow.
I think it does.
I've never seen a book do that before. It's insane.
It's like a wrap up to the whole series, not just the trilogy, which is awesome.
If I don't count a reread, I mean, if I count a reread, it's Storm of Swords, of course. But if I'm not
Oh,
counting
sure.
rereads, it's going to be Fool's Fate.
Fool's Fate
Yeah.
rules.
Oh,
So
Fool's
so
Fate.
I still think I liked Fool's Errand more, just because of how much it destroyed me. But I read that last year, so
it does do that. Yeah.
that book was horrible. I will never forget how much I've never ever cried like that in a book ever.
Yeah,
before.
I remember we had some messages back and forth, and I
Oh my
picked up-
gosh.
so,
It was horrible. I was sobbing my eyes out. My eyes were burning from crying so much.
that's what Hob does to us.
Mm.
Well, not me. I don't really cry, but on the inside, I'm crying.
You're
so,
like dead on the inside. Yeah.
yeah.
Are you all still doing that read along on Mike's channel? I think he said he was pausing for a while. Is that right?
Yeah, he was gonna pick up Rain Wilds, I think, in June, but I don't think that's gonna happen now. He might put that off. He and Philip are reading them together, so whenever the two of them can sync up their schedule.
Mm.
So I'll probably pause until they pick it back up again, because that's where I'm at in my rereads. So, but we should be doing our Tawny Man live chat sometime in June. So I'm looking forward to that.
Sweet.
That's cool. Yay.
What about you, Joanna?
Yeah,
What's
that's
your
such a
favorite
good
book?
question. That is such a good question because so much of my reading has been rereading this
Uh-huh.
year.
Yeah.
Man, what have I even
Song
read
of
this year?
Song of Ice and Fire really throws in their
Yeah.
reread
It
time.
does. Yeah. It's taken up so much of my reading this last year. Um, man, I really loved and I can't really decide which of the 2 I loved the most, but I really loved, All the Pretty Horses and the Crossing by Cormac McCarthy.
That's another. I was gonna bring that up too. Yeah. I just
Yeah.
like impulse read All the Pretty Horses last week, 2 weeks ago, and I was just like blown, totally blown away. I was
It's
like,
so
not.
good.
Oh my god! Because it's. I know I've read every McCarthy except for Border Trilogy and Suttree, and I was kind of just waiting for them. And I know a lot of people who have read everything that he's written and are like, "Oh, all the Border Trilogy is really good," but like they'll always put like Blood Meridian top and The Road and all the other stuff. And I was like, kind of going into it expecting to like it and enjoy it, but that book like floored me. There were so many just one-liners. I was just like, holy moly, these could be like tattoos on people. They're like crazy. It's just like so heavy.
Yeah.
But yeah, I love that book.
It's a lot easier of a read than Blood Meridian too. I think it's a
Yeah,
lot
definitely.
smoother.
Oh, easily. Yeah.
Yeah.
Blood Meridian's is a challenging read for
It's
sure.
a very challenging read.
Yeah.
I
Goodness.
don't know if I was in the wrong state of mind or what, but Blood Meridian, I didn't I didn't connect with anything that was going. I was happy when it was done. I felt like there was, I don't know. I felt like it was designed to do things.
It's a tough
or something.
It's a tough book for sure. And it's
Yeah.
like I mean, I know Jimmy read it last year, and then immediately after he finished reading it, he went back or reread it.
Yeah,
And
I read it with him when on his reread.
yeah,
And it was at the same
it's
time as I was reading Baker, and it was cool because the last Prince of Nothing trilogy book ends up
it is. I
it
saw
opens with a
that.
Blood Meridian quote. So it was like
Yeah,
it was really cool. And then when I finished, it was funny because I read that and then I forgot about it, and then I read Blood Meridian, and then I finished the Prince of Nothing trilogy, and then I looked back at the quote and I was like, "Oh, that's my favorite quote in Blood Meridian. How cool is that?"
That's
No,
cool.
I don't feel like I understood everything. I feel like I need to unpack some
Yeah.
things in Blood Meridian, but I loved it. I actually think, honestly, it's probably the most atmospheric book I've ever read.
yeah,
It's the most atmospheric book I've ever read, and it kind of blew my mind too because, just being he writes from the part of the country where I'm from and where
Mhm.
my family's from, so I feel like a deep connection to that atmosphere and to that setting, and the way he
Mhm.
describes the desert, and I mean, I know you're from the desert too, Scott, but, like, the way he describes it, I feel like a lot of people who've only been to the desert or, like, visited the desert but not lived in it,
Sure.
they just see it as brown dirt, you know?
Yep.
I had friends like that when I was living in Tucson. I had friends who came to Tucson, from other places, and they just couldn't see it any other way. They're like, "It's just dirt," you know? And I'm like, "It's not though. There's so much, like, beauty. If you look, there's so many colors, and there's so much
Mhm.
richness and texture and variation, and if you just look
Sure.
for it, you have to let your eyes settle for a while, but you start to see so much there, and I feel like reading his descriptions of the desert, they never felt like just one view of the desert. It felt like they were constantly he was
Yep.
constantly
That's
shifting your perspective around to see every little detail, and it never got old. I don't know how he came up with so much variation on how to describe things, but he does. He just comes up with so much variation on how to describe things. So that was really what spoke to me, but there were just some very in-depth conversations in that book too of
Mhm.
just he has this
Oh
way
yeah,
of talking about life and death and the primordial aspect
death
of
for sure.
everything that just
Yeah,
is so, it's so beautifully written. It's so provocative and yet so dark at the same time. So I find that so compelling.
yeah,
I will try it again at some point. I really did love The Road, but that's the only other
yeah.
McCarthy.
There is.
Um, I'm interested in the new dual. Is it a duology? Stella something and
Mm-hmm.
whatever the other
Passenger.
ones.
Yeah,
Those
still
and the
there.
passenger. Those look interesting to me, but I haven't gotten around to it yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, those are good. I like those. I don't know where I have a general ranking so far, but very curious to see where it all lands once I finish Border Trilogy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But
What's one piece of advice that you wish you had given yourself when you started your channel? Because you all have been
Oh.
you've all had channels for a little while now, and I'd just be curious. This was actually a question I asked Alan. I'm going to ask you all.
Don't worry.
Yeah.
I feel like starting a channel, and we were kind of talking about this before we went live, but
Mhm.
it's very easy to, once you start, kind of get wrapped up into the chaos of posting a video, thinking about what your next video is going to be, recording it, and just going on this cycle. And to the point that if you could be out doing something with family and then you could find yourself thinking about, oh, what's my next video going to be? I still got to do this. I think for me, that was something that I had to work on to proactively not do that, and to just be like, it's all going to be fine. I'm going to record it when I'm going to record it. I know like what I'm going to talk about. And if I don't get it recorded by the time I plan on doing it, I will get it recorded at a future time. It's all going to be okay. And I just think for me personally, that was just something that I just get used to, and kind of, that's why I've never really stuck to be like, oh, I post on Wednesdays. I try, because that would stress me out too much. I just need to like post. I try to post like once a week. But just saying that allows me to have a mental flexibility to be like, okay, I can post when and where I want. And it just has helped me. I feel like the first couple of months, it was a little stressful just being like, oh, I got to get this video up. And it's like, you don't have to, you don't have to do anything, but you can. And so like, because I just feel like it's easy to burn out with doing something like BookTube, let alone anything like this, where you're sinking way more time in it than you may have expected. I have expected going into it. So I just think finding the way to balance not only your time, but also like mental space between everything else that is going on in life is a huge thing that has improved my experience with it over the last couple of months.
Oh, beautifully said.
Yeah.
Beautifully said. And I hope that's encouraging too, in case anybody is in our chat that is interested in starting a channel. I think that could be really useful. What about you, Joana? Because you've had your channel longer than I have. When did you start your channel?
Well, I started like a while ago, and then I deleted everything that I had, and then I'd stopped for like 3 years or something, and then the pandemic came, and I think like most people, I was like, oh, you know what? Even though everything is gone from my channel, I will come back and just start posting again, which is probably also why like I don't know, it's just like obscure my channel. But I think something that I would tell myself is people above numbers, because I think that it's very easy to get caught up in the numbers game in thinking this video isn't performing as well. And YouTube really likes to remind you like, hey, people aren't watching as much as they used to or something, you know? And, or you see, for example, someone that starts their channel after you, and you see they're taking off really quickly and they're gaining thousands of subscribers really fast, and then you can be thinking, what am I doing wrong or something like that. And honestly, I've never gotten as much joy out of reaching a certain number of subscribers or a certain number of views than I have from the friends I've made. I literally just got back from a trip with one of my best friends that I made thanks to BookTube. So it's just, that's what matters the most, like these discussions, which is why like I haven't been posting on my channel, but I've still been participating in live shows, because this is what I love. It's like talking to the people that I've met and gotten to know through BookTube and that I appreciate. And that's, I think, the most important thing is just like the people that you get to know and just be a part of the community and just how do you say that, interact with people, talk to people, and don't be scared, because everyone is just super nice. And I think it can be intimidating if you want to start now and thinking, well, but all these people know each other. We just all like books. We all just like to talk books. So yeah.
Oh, I love that so much. People before numbers and everything you said. That was wonderful. That was so special. I love that. Especially because I feel that too. It's been such a great journey so far, and I feel like it can be easy to get caught up in that game for whatever reason, because YouTube does that to you.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like that's not, the real thing, the real reward is doing things like meeting you guys and getting to talk about, like our love of A Song of Ice and Fire, or talking about new books together. So and forming those connections, because there's just nothing more special than having other friends that you could talk to about books, because it's, I think for most of us, it's the case where There might be a couple of other people in our real lives where we could talk about books, but maybe not as much or as in depth
Yeah,
as we
definitely
nowhere
not.
near.
Yeah, my husband's probably grateful. Just forget it. I mean, he's just not that interested in Song of Ice and Fire. But anyway, yeah. So what about you, Scott?
I probably made about every mistake you could make along the way. So I probably would have told
We all
myself to
have.
start sooner, I guess, because it is something I considered doing before I finally buckled down and made my first video.
Great advice. Yeah,
But
great.
the old Japanese saying, "The best time to plant a tree is a year ago," or whatever time frame you want. The next best time is right now. So probably I should have not procrastinated as long as I did, because then I could have made the mistake sooner and gotten to something marginally better sooner. So that's yeah, I guess that's what I would tell myself: start sooner.
Oh, that's neat. So
love
had you
that.
kind of wanted to start a channel for a long time and then
I'd considered it, but I always kind
That
of
was me.
the self-defeating. I don't have anything new to add. Like there's the channels are already there that I love. What's the difference? Like all that stuff. So I had to get past all the negative self-talk.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's still unnatural for me to talk to myself in front of a camera to this day, but it's gotten easier, I guess. So that's
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Was that you? So you said that was you too, Alex? You took a long time before
Definitely.
deciding to commit?
Yeah. I mean, I'd watched BookTuber for a while before I ever made a video, and
Me
it
too.
was always something I wanted to do. I'd be like, oh, I would love to do this. I love watching it. I feel like, oh, this would be a lot of fun to kind of make my own stuff. And you just get that like self-defeating, like, but I feel like I start building this learning curve higher than it ever was, being like, oh, but you have to do all this stuff, like
right.
by like tech
I don't
stuff.
have the right equipment. I don't have the
Yeah.
Mm.
And then I was just like,
thumbnail. Yeah, all that
I was
stuff.
like, I could just get all that stuff later. I'll just use my phone, and then we'll upgrade along the way. If I even enjoy it, I'm not going to go out and spend thousands of dollars on stuff. Like,
Yeah.
it's like not important. Just like make the video. I do think that, a lot of people always say, just go out and record a video and post it. It'll literally only get better from there. Your first video is always going to be your least confident, worst video that you post.
Yeah.
And I totally agree with that. I think no matter how great everything else is, I feel like just posting and getting more experience of it will just improve everything. And it'll also reinforce if you like doing it or not, because it's okay to love reading and to hate making videos. And I think there's it's like two separate things that we're all, talking about books. We all love books, but I think, I think there's you learn pretty quickly if like you enjoy this, and if it's not something you enjoy, I think it's totally okay to be like, meh, it's okay. But if it's something you do enjoy, then hey, keep up with it. It's it's very rewarding if you are finding yourself enjoying it.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And sometimes you don't know if you're going to love doing the process, I think. Because I know that before I started a channel, I heard so many people talk about, oh, I hate editing. And I was like kind of scared about editing. But it turns out for me, actually, even though I'm terrible at it and I want to learn how to do better at editing, I don't mind it. Like it doesn't seem to bother me. In fact, there's something that feels really rewarding about putting a video together and bringing it to completion. So I think, you're right that it is two separate things. Absolutely. Yeah. The reason I was kind of bringing this up to you all is that before the live show, we were talking, and I went on vacation this last week. So I actually didn't do much reading while I was on vacation. I was with my family, and I'll probably talk about that in a future video as well. So sorry you're going to hear it probably twice, but I just, while I was there, it was interesting because I did feel the tug and pull of like, oh, I should be reading because I have a channel and I have to I should be thinking about the next video. And as soon as I recognized that, I was like, I need to be present with my family. That's what's in front of me right now. That's what's important right now. And life is so important. You can't let anything, I think it's true about BookTube, but anything in life, you can get caught up in anything in life and let that take over. And I think it's so important to bring attention to being present with your loved ones while you have them and while you're there with your family or your friends, whatever it is. And your dog, it doesn't matter, just learning to be present with your life and being okay with that stuff, taking some pauses now and then. And I say that because it really bothers me that YouTube doesn't, it almost, not only does it not reward pauses, but it punishes pauses. It seems
Yeah, it
to.
does. Yeah.
And I find that so, that's so unhealthy, honestly.
Mhm.
So I don't know. I've
It's
been
just like a
reflecting on
different.
that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
There's a lot of YouTube communities that are much more analytic driven. I feel like BookTube, that's one of the things that's nice about it. Like, yeah, they're definitely, you have channels of all sizes, but I do feel like there's not like a barrier. I think like it's very, I mean, Murphy was just in the chat. She has quite a number of subscribers. And I feel like it's very often that you'll find huge collaborations or just talking to people of all what I know, however big or small their YouTube channel is. They are more than happy to talk with you because they love books, and that's why they started it to begin with. It's just a very unique community for that reason. A lot of YouTube communities are just not like that at all. Like it's just much more data driven, which is what it is.
Yeah, definitely.
That's a really good point. That's really a good point. Such a community driven section of YouTube. Whereas other communities, that might not be the case. You might not see like beauty YouTubers. I don't know. I could be wrong. Maybe getting together and putting makeup
I don't
on.
think you're wrong.
I don't know.
I think that's right.
I don't think you are wrong. Yeah.
That would be funny, actually. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, because there are other sections of YouTube. So whereas we have book hauls, like there are some people who have like in health YouTube sections, like grocery hauls, or whatever it is, whatever the hobby is. But this is a much more community-driven type of collaboration-driven type of community, and I think that's the beauty of it.
Yep.
I'm just gonna catch up on the chat just a little bit here. Let's see. I had done maybe 2 videos when I was home. I had no job during the pandemic, and now that I'm busy working, I find I always make excuses.
I get
That's
that.
good.
Yeah.
It's interesting how much the pandemic affected BookTube, right?
Oh, significantly. I would,
I had no idea that BookTube was a thing. Like I thought I was in this bubble. Like I was the only person alive reading fantasy books. I'm not kidding. I've never known anyone in my life that had read anything besides Lord of the Rings. I'm just this weird person among many that likes this stuff, and clearly there's no market for what I'm doing. But then I found these channels, and I'm like, this is crazy that people like stuff I do. So
yeah. That's interesting. So did you find it during the pandemic or?
March of 2020, the height of the pandemic, I decided I was gonna get back into reading fantasy because it had been a little while since I had last latched onto something. I was in the midst of the biggest reading slump of my life. In that previous year, I had started and DNF'd The Gunslinger. I had started and DNF'd for Stormlight book. I couldn't grab onto anything. I wasn't latching onto stuff that I'm like, I feel like I should like this, and I wasn't finishing the books. And like, well, finally I have extra time. I'm not commuting every day. I'm going to get back into this stuff. And I literally just started looking on YouTube. I'm like, this is insane. I found Daniel's channel. I found Mike's channel, and then it just branched out from there.
Yeah. It's funny the way it does that. It's like if you're new to YouTube, that's like where YouTube takes you.
Yeah.
But I actually found it earlier than 2020. Same with Joana, I'm sure.
Yeah.
You found it a long time ago, right? When did
My
you find
story,
it?
I found it. Okay, this is really weird, but okay. I was, this was like 2011, I think, 2012.
Wow.
And I was watching beauty videos back then. And this was when the Hunger Games movies were coming out. So yeah, probably 2011, 2012. Wow. And then they were reading the books, and I was like, wait, there's other people who read books and talk about it online. This is a thing. Okay, this is my people, because beauty is fine, but like books, And then I found there's other people who read and talk about books, and that's when I discovered it. And back then the channels were very different. This is when I don't know, Reagan Peruse Project was starting out and stuff like that. So yeah, this was long time ago. And then in 2020, that's when I discovered, like, I will say our section of BookTube, which is the adult SFF, so with shelf space and everything. So yeah.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, same here. I didn't know about adult SFF BookTube for a long time. I think that YouTube, it takes time for YouTube the algorithm to understand who you are as a reader.
Yeah. I think
Yeah.
so.
So yeah, it's interesting. It's so interesting though, but it was interesting to be getting into BookTube and then suddenly 2020 happens and then you see like, wow, there's just been an explosion of new channels since then.
Yeah.
I didn't even
And-
really know YouTube was like that's how out of touch I was. Like I didn't, and now
I love that.
I think I would not be able to live without YouTube Premium. So
Oh, me too. I have YouTube
Same.
Premium
outside
too.
of reading,
my
YouTube
gosh.
is my biggest thing that I do. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
And it's-
interesting.
I guess, Joanna, can I ask a question?
Yeah, please do.
So I found that I love this type of content, the long form, like for example, the stuff that Scott, you participate on Mike's channel when you guys talk about, I don't know, like House of the Dragon and
Mhm.
everything. That's my favorite stuff to listen to. So, but I know that like this is the trend of like all these short things. So what do you guys
Yeah.
prefer?
Long.
I don't
Oh,
like
this stuff.
making them or watching them. I don't
Yeah.
get.
Yeah.
I
Long
don't.
form.
I'm,
Me too.
I'm not the audience. I guess I don't know.
Yeah.
I rarely, unless I'm good friends with the person, I rarely ever click on shorts, honestly. And I'm not against them, and I'm
No.
not opposed to maybe someday I'll do them. I'll never say never to that, and I understand, but at the same time, I guess I kind of do though, because I'm on Instagram, so I check out stories. I guess that's
Mhm.
sort of like short
Yeah.
form content, but I like in-depth discussions, and
Yeah.
I'm also
Yeah.
really nerdy. I love thinking about books. I love to like read books, but I also love to think about them, and I love to like reflect on them, and then I love to hear other people think about them and talk about what their thoughts are about them. So I don't know. I'm kind of a nerd that way. So I
love
do
that.
like
That's
more
the
in
kind
depth.
of nerd we like. That's good.
Yeah, I feel the
Yeah.
same way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
In
I will
fact,
even watch a 1.5 hour video before I'll watch a 20-minute video.
wow.
Yeah, because that's how much I love these kinds of things.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Yeah, I wish I had more time to do more watching,
Yeah.
but I do have YouTube Premium, so it is fantastic. In fact,
Oh,
I probably
YouTube
don't
Premium,
do.
it's such a lifesaver.
Yeah, I probably listen to more audiobooks, honestly, except that I'm listening to a lot of BookTube these days. So
Mhm.
yeah, there's so
Yeah.
many great channels out there. Jadia says, I admire you guys. I hate being on camera. I could never, but I love chatting. And so I thank you for organizing these chats. Well, thank you, Shadia. And I mean, the nice thing too is that we can have these live discussions where we can interact with you still. And we have, of course, Discords too. And I think that that's
Yeah.
a beautiful thing too, because I understand that. I totally understand that. I think there was a time when in fact, it's kind of weird that I have embraced being on camera because honestly, in real life, my family can tell you I hate pictures. Like I hate pictures of me. I can't stand it.
Same.
I almost never let people take my picture. So I'm really weird about that kind of thing. So I can understand that too. Christopher says that he likes editing for
It's probably more than.
more than
More than recording.
Yeah.
recording.
I think.
Interesting. Yeah. It took 2 years. Wow. Yeah. Yeah. It could take some time for sure. I was definitely a long time lurker of BookTube before I even started commenting on channels.
Yeah, that's
Before I started a channel. So
I love watching like Colin when he started his channel. I was so excited because I love watching people who are like really active in Discords and stuff, like start a channel. I'm just like, oh, I'm excited to watch this, see what you guys are gonna want to do. And it's just always really enjoyable.
yeah, I felt kind of like that person too, because I was very active, like in Shelf Space Discord and commenting on Alan's channel. And I think it was in his Discord too. And I was interacting a lot with Philip. So Philip and Alan were already really good friends. I considered friends already before I started my channel. And then to be on screen, it was so it's nerve-wracking. You're like, oh my gosh, they're gonna see what I look like and how I talk. But yeah, it's interesting. It does help though. It does help if you are established in the community a little bit, because then that way I think you'll have a little bit more interaction rather than talking to the void. And there are a lot of people out there that are great about wanting to support new channels and help you get subscribed, all that kind of thing. I don't have a lot of people to talk to about the books I read. This opened up so much of my interaction with others. It's just amazing that way.
Yep.
Free. And we love Dan. Dan, we love you. I loved this part of the conversation. The biggest barrier to overcome was the man in my head telling me I'm not good enough to do this. I have that woman in my head all the time. Sometimes
Get
he's a
that
man,
totally.
but I have that voice in my head too.
Yeah.
So it's a challenge for sure. That inner critic.
Yeah.
Cool. Yeah. So I think unless you all have any final. Oh my gosh! Thank you so much for the 199 there. Very nice of you. It's great to hear everybody's origin story here too, and
Yeah.
how they've come into the community. Fantastic. Well, I think that I would love to hear you guys. Do you have any other points to add? And before I close off this conversation.
Well, points. I'm just happy to have been invited. I appreciate it.
Yeah,
Same.
this was
Yeah, thank you
this was a
so
ton of
much.
fun. Yeah.
Yeah,
I think like
really-
I go just piggybacking off of what we were just talking about. I think if anyone's watching this and is thinking about, doing what I
Just-
did and telling myself I can't do it for like the longest time, just try it. Just record a video, post it, and see what happens. I think for me, it was like the second I posted that first video, I felt so much better, and I was just like felt way more confident even in the second video, and that just kind of grew exponentially. So I feel like, Nike just do it. I think really applies in
Wow,
something like
that's-
this. So
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely true. And I think too, like one other thing I would say too is don't feel like you have to be like every other channel. If you want
absolutely
to,
not.
if
Yeah.
you gravitate towards it, go for it. If you
Mhm.
love doing TBRs, if you love doing wrap-ups, if you love doing book hauls, those kinds of content, vlogs, if that's what you gravitate towards,
Mhm.
go with what you gravitate towards. But if you don't, there's no pressure to do that. There's
Yeah.
no pressure to have any sort of similar content. Some people just like having channels where they're more involved in collaborations than anything. Like
Yep.
Evie, for example, I think that she's a wonderful channel, but she's really active with like live sprints and discussions. But she's a huge part of our community. And so like you don't
Yeah.
have to do BookTube one way. So I think that would
Like just do what excites you, and I feel like
Yeah.
as you start, you'll gravitate to things that excite you to film.
Yep.
And it usually ends up being what you like watching as well. So in like one way, shape, or form. So definitely a
Yeah.
good
yeah.
way to judge.
And those people who don't like cameras, I mean, there are even channels out there like Jeremy Fee who don't show themselves in the video. They just show a cartoon image of themselves and a bunch of other photos. But
Yeah, if I was going to do it again, maybe I would do that. I would have a good image of myself would be better, but it's too late for that.
yeah, there are some channels like that. It's kind of fun to see them. Mhm. Yeah, fantastic. Well, I'm so glad to hear everybody's wisdom about this because I think there's a lot to be said about that. This is a beautiful hobby, and we're all so passionate about it. And yet, there still has to be, a balance for how we approach it too. Because there are going to be those like negative voices in our minds sometimes, or other things that pull at our attention. So.
Oh, Philip.
Oh, Philip. Yeah. Yeah. I don't think, that's the beauty of it is that we're all so unique here. Philip and Alan and everybody here. All right. Well, thank you all so much for joining me. I hope to have you back someday. This is
Yeah,
a
this was
discussion
ton of
series.
fun.
Thank you so much.
I keep the why read question kind of dynamic because, maybe someday if I invite you back, you might have a different answer. Maybe you don't, but, it'll still lead to an interesting conversation. But
Definitely.
in any case,
Definitely.
these are all lovely people. It goes without saying, but if you're not subscribed to these wonderful, wonderful booktubers, please do so. And I'll leave their channel links in the description of the replay. And of course, the replay is also available if you missed any of this. But I appreciate all of you so much for joining us here today. Thank you, everybody in the chat. And thank you again to my lovely guests. And hope you all have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.
Bye.
See you, everyone.